The monsoon rain hit hard against the window of a cramped apartment in Karachi. Thunder cracked overhead, and the smell of wet earth drifted through the half-open glass. Aisha was sitting cross-legged on her bed, scrolling lazily through her phone, when her uncle arrived. He was late, as always, his clothes damp, his hands clutching a small brown parcel wrapped in paper and tied with a single thread. He placed it on the table without a word. "There," he said softly, his voice rough from the weather. "Something rare. Keep it safe." When Aisha pulled apart the paper, she found a doll unlike anything she had ever seen. Its head was slightly too large for its small body. Wide glass eyes stared outward, unblinking, and its grin stretched unnaturally across its pale face. Two sharp ears stuck out from the top of its head, giving it an animal-like appearance. The box smelled faintly of iron, damp wood, and something sour. Her uncle didn't stay to explain. He simply turned, muttered something under his breath, and left. The door clicked shut, and silence returned. That night, Aisha set the doll on her study table, facing the wall so she wouldn't have to look at its smile while she slept. But in the middle of the night, at 2:47 a.m., she awoke with a start. The sound of soft thuds echoed in the room. Her eyes adjusted to the dim blue light of the moon filtering through the curtains. On her pillow, inches from her face, sat the doll. Its glass eyes stared directly into hers, its head tilted unnaturally to one side. Her breath caught in her throat. She hadn't moved it. With trembling hands, she snatched the doll and shoved it back onto the table. She told herself it was just sleepwalking, some half-dream, half-reality confusion. But unease coiled deep inside her chest. The following afternoon, her best friend Sana visited. Sana laughed when she saw the doll, picking it up and turning it over. "Creepy little thing," she said, but as she held it, her nose suddenly began to bleed. Bright red drops splashed onto the doll's pale head. Sana gasped, clutching her face. I don't know why this is happening." She dropped the doll quickly, backing away. Her eyes darted nervously to the door. "This thing doesn't want me here." Aisha tried to laugh it off, but her hands shook as she wiped the blood from the doll. That night, she placed the doll inside her cupboard, pushing clothes against it before locking the door with a small brass key. She even whispered to herself, "Stay there." But at dawn, when she opened her eyes, the cupboard door was wide open. The brass key still hung from the lock, and the doll sat calmly on her bedspread, its grin wider than before. From that morning onward, nothing in the apartment felt normal. Light bulbs flickered whenever the doll was in sight. The air turned heavy, as if filled with static. Shadows stretched longer than they should have. Aisha began to hear things. Tiny whispers at the corner of her room, giggles like a child hiding in the dark, followed by a low growl that seemed to come from beneath her bed. She bought a small audio recorder, placing it beside her while she slept. The next morning, she pressed play. At exactly 3:15 a.m., the sound of tiny feet scurrying across the floor filled the room. Then a voice, faint but distinct, whispered one word again and again. "Mine. Mine. Mine." Her skin crawled. She unplugged the recorder, shoved it in a drawer, and tried to convince herself it was interference or some trick of the device. But her nights became restless. She would wake to scratches on the walls. One evening, she found her own arm marked with 3 deep red lines, as though something had dragged claws across her skin while she slept. Terrified, she decided to destroy it. She placed the doll in the sink, lit a match, and held it to its cotton body. The flames touched, flickered for a second, then died as if smothered by invisible hands. Not even a scorch mark remained. Desperate, Aisha called her uncle. Her voice shook as she described what had happened. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then he whispered, almost afraid to say the words aloud. "I should never have given it to you. That doll. It belonged to a child who died violently. Her spirit lingers. The doll chooses its owner. Once chosen, it never leaves." Aisha's hand went cold as the phone slipped slightly from her grip. "What do I do?" she whispered. But her uncle only repeated, "Don't anger it. Don't try to give it away. Just survive it." That night, she awoke at 3:15 sharp. On her forearm, fresh words had been carved in jagged letters. "Stay with me forever." Blood trickled onto her sheets. She gasped, clutching her arm, her eyes darting to the corner of the room. The doll sat on her desk, its grin stretched wider than ever, red drops staining its pale face. Aisha could not bear another night. She wrapped the doll in a black cloth, tied it tight, and carried it out of the apartment. The streets were empty, washed clean from the day's rain. She walked quickly, her breath coming in short bursts, until she reached the abandoned railway yard at the edge of town. The place was silent, except for the distant whistle of a passing train. She dug into the wet soil with her bare hands, shoving earth aside until her nails broke and her fingers bled. She placed the doll in the pit, whispering, "Stay here. Leave me alone." She began covering it with dirt, but the earth trembled beneath her palms. The mound shifted, and from behind her came a sound, a child's laughter, high-pitched and cruel. She turned. The doll was no longer in the hole. It stood upright on the ground, black cloth fallen around its feet, head tilting slowly side to side. The whispers grew louder. They weren't in her ears now. They were inside her skull. Voices chanting, calling her name, demanding her soul. She dropped to her knees, clutching her head, screaming. The doll stepped closer, though its legs never moved. Its glass eyes glowed faintly red. Then the vision came. She saw a little girl tied to a wooden chair, crying. Men's shadows circled her, laughing. In her lap sat the same Labubu doll, staring silently as the girl screamed her last breath. The vision burned itself into Aisha's mind. She understood then. The doll was not simply haunted. It was hungry. It fed on suffering, binding each new victim to its curse. The ground beneath Aisha cracked open. She stumbled backward as the soil swallowed her legs. The last thing she saw was the doll's face pressing close, its grin splitting impossibly wide, as if it were swallowing her whole. The next morning, railway workers found the yard eerily disturbed. A patch of freshly turned soil lay in the center, damp with rain. On top of it sat the Labubu doll, its eyes bright, its grin stretched wider than ever. Aisha was never seen again.